Hi, Algebra 2. We are working on lessons. I'm kind of combining lessons 1-4 and 1-5 to get you guys going. And we are working on rules for addition. Our essential question today is, do you know how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide integers, which also consist of the real numbers? So let's start by looking at a few rules. The first rule that we are going to look at is if A and B are negative numbers, then A plus B is negative. So A plus B is, notice how they kind of factor out that negative and add the absolute value. So it's just like adding two positive numbers. You never ever question that. If I add 5 plus 9, you know that's a positive 14. So if I was to add a negative 5 and a negative 9, we know that's a negative 14. Now, if you notice what the book does, they factor that negative out, and then they add the absolute value of those numbers. So sometimes we just say if the numbers are positive, add it and make it positive. If the numbers are negative, add them and make it negative. Moving on to statement number 2. If A is a positive number and B is a negative number, subtract the numbers and take the sign of, notice they say the absolute value, the sign of the larger number. So we have 9 and negative 5. I'm going to take the sign of the larger number in absolute value. So I know this is really just add a negative like you learned in Saxon Math. 9 plus a negative 5 is positive 4. Now, what happens if it's the other way around? 5 plus negative 9. We're still going to take this sign, even though negative 9 is a smaller number. Remember, they're telling us to take the sign of the absolute value, so the answer is negative 4. You are not allowed to use calculators on this stuff. Please make sure you learn how to use it. All right, let's look at example 1. Example 1 says negative 17 plus 12. We are going to take the sign of the larger number and subtract. 17 minus 12 is 5. So negative 17 plus 12 is negative 5. All right, letter B. Letter B says negative 17 minus 12. Well, this now has been a subtraction sign. And in Saxon Math, you learned how to add a negative. So now I have two negatives. I have a negative 17 and a negative 12. So I know my answer is going to be negative. And I'm going to add these together. 17 and 12 are 29. So negative 17 and negative 12 are negative 29. Moving on. We are going to add a negative. So when I have two negatives together, they become positive. Now we're back to the same question in A. Negative 17 plus 12. The answer is negative 5. The last one, positive 17, negative 12. Take the sign of the larger. We know it's going to be positive. 17 minus 12 is positive 5. How'd you do? All right, moving on to example 2. I want to try to help you to manipulate your thinking. We can use properties and all that to go ahead and commute and associate and all that good stuff. But I do want to put your attention to this first question. It says simplify, and we are adding negative 14 plus 9 plus negative 12 plus 20 plus a negative 8. I am going to combine negative 12 and negative 8. So we could take all the steps of associating, commuting, but for sake of time, I'm going to just show you how I'm adding those together. Now, the reason I'm doing that is because I know that negative 12 and negative 8 add up to be negatives. Now, I'm going to line them all up with all the negatives. Negative 12 and negative 8 is negative 20. And I still have that 9 and that positive 20. Now, do you see what the next step would be? The next step would be fairly simple because, as you can see, a negative 20 and a positive 20, those can just cancel out, right? So if I have negative 14 and a positive 9, I'm going to take the sign of the absolute value of the larger number, so this will be negative, and I'm going to subtract. 14 minus 9 is 5. So let's look at the next example and see what we can do to manipulate this to make it a little easier for us. I'm going to give you a minute to look at it. All right, so hopefully you combined all the negatives together and added them. Negative 12 and negative 3 is negative 15, and negative 1 is negative 16. And I also know I have a positive 18 and a positive 2, which is positive 20. Negative 16 plus 20, we're going to take the sign of the larger number, so it's going to be positive. And 16 and 20, the difference of that is 4. How'd y'all do? All right, so with a fairly simple lesson, we do have an area in which you guys tend to make mistakes. These absolute value signs on number 4 are grouping signs. So remember, we want to solve inside the absolute values first. 5 minus 12, the absolute value of negative 7. We are going to take our time so we don't make any mistakes. 13 minus 2 is 11. Now, we do have to find the absolute value of each. The absolute value of negative 7 is 7. The absolute value of 11 is 11. And if you want to show add a negative, that's fine. Add a negative. So we have a positive 7 added to a negative 11. We're going to take the sign of the larger and subtract. 11 minus 7 is negative 4.